Long ago and far away, on a cold, starry night, a baby girl was born. Born within high castle walls, for her father was a king and her mother a beautiful queen. All the kingdom rejoiced at the birth of the child, but alas, tragedy touched the happy event. On the third day, the queen grew gravely ill and passed away. Overcome with grief, the king at first could not find a suitable name for a babe so fair. "I will call her Wintersong," he said finally, "and may she be the warmth in this long, cold season." And so it was. The child grew but never knew the comfort of a mother's touch. Although the king loved her dearly and showed her every kindness, he was too occupied with the business of his kingdom to give her the time a young child needs. So she knew only the cool hands of her ladies' maids and servants. One night her father came into her tower room and knelt at her bedside. "My dear child," he said, "I must leave you for a while. Remember, you will be the song in my heart to warm me until I return." Then he slipped a small golden object into her hand and kissed her sleepy face. In the morning mist, the king rode off to the lands to the east with his legion of men. Wintersong heard the pounding of hundreds of horses' hooves and her father's strong, deep voice. "Away, men, away." She snuggled deeper into her covers as a tear caressed her cheek. "Goodbye, father, and fare thee well," she murmured. She looked at the object shining in her hand and saw that it was a heart-shaped locket. Opening it, she found a golden red lock of hair, her dear mother's hair. Wintersong pressed the locket to her breast and cried, "Now I am alone, all alone." The months passed ever so slowly, but at last spring flowers began dotting the countryside upon which she gazed from her tower window. Spring, a time to be happy, she thought to herself. Yet I fear I shall see my father no more. Her own name softly escaped her lips. Wintersong, Wintersong. Am I to know only the cold, lonely winter's song my whole life through? One morning in the spring of her 14th year, she wakened as usual to breakfast on her silver tray. She ate quickly, dressed, and wrapped herself in a light cape. Then she set out to roam the countryside in search of wildflowers. Soon she was walking deeper and deeper into a forest of trees, where all was quiet and peaceful. Bird sounds touched her ears, and then another sound, a soft, tinkling sound. She knelt, putting her face nearer the forest floor. She heard it again, the musical tinkle of many tiny voices, and saw that the lilting voices came from many lovely little faces, sprinkled amidst a flutter of delicate wings, fairy wings. The beautiful little creatures seemed overwrought. Something was amiss. Wintersong saw in the center of the ring of fairies a beautiful form, a tiny, perfect fairy woman, the queen of the fairies. Her hair shimmered and sparkled as she shook her lovely head in distress. "Oh, what am I to do?" the fairy queen cried. "My wing is torn. How shall I fly away with you when the leaves have turned to a golden blanket upon the ground? You will have to choose a new queen, and I must remain here in the bitter cold without you." Wintersong's heart was so taken with pity for the fairy queen and her plight that she spoke aloud. "Oh, poor fairies, I surely would help you if I could." Stillness fell upon the small band as they all turned in her direction. In awe, they gazed at the exquisite young human child with golden hair and violet eyes. The wounded fairy queen spoke, ending the silence. "Take me nearer to the child." They bore her up, and through the whir of wings, Wintersong heard the musical voice again. I am the Fairy Queen, and this forest is my summer kingdom. Around me you see my loyal friends whom I love very much. Last night, by the light of the spring moon, we danced and sang in celebration of our return. Quite suddenly and without warning, a wild beast with long, sharp claws pounced into our circle and caught my wing in its grasp. The others managed to frighten it away, but not before it had torn my wing. Now I fear I am maimed forever, no longer fit to lead my beloved people away when the cold season comes again. Now they must choose another queen, and when the snow falls upon the land, I must go to live underground with the wood sprites and gnomes. There I will surely die. But what if your wing could be mended? Asked Wintersong. She thought for a moment, then said, I shall bring the finest slender needle from my maid's sewing basket, and yes, a spider's web would do. Oh yes, I can mend your wing for you. 100 tiny voices tinkled excitedly. Yes, yes, they chimed, save our queen, and we will be your loyal friends forever. Be at ease, dear fairies, said Wintersong. I shall return tonight to this very spot to begin my task. So the fairies bade her goodbye, and she went quickly on her way. As she returned to the castle, her heart was pounding with excitement. At last, she thought, I will have wonderful friends. I won't be lonely anymore. Back at the castle, she found the sewing basket in the maid's pantry, and therein the precious small needle that would help save the Fairy Queen's life. Wintersong looked around and saw the maids busily at work in the kitchen. She tucked the needle safely into the hem of her cape. Then she entered the great empty dining room, where her one lonely place was set at the huge table. Still, supper was a welcome sight, and she ate hungrily after her adventure in the forest. Imagining the events that would follow that very night, Wintersong drifted off to sleep in her chair. She wakened abruptly, startled by the shrieks of one of the maids. Who has made off with my sewing needle? Wintersong could still hear the angry voice as she quietly climbed the stairs to her tower room to prepare for her midnight's quest. Don't worry, she said quietly. I will return the needle safely to you. And through her tower window she thought she could hear the tiny merry tinkle of fairy voices on the evening air. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the fairies were busy with their task. They asked a friendly spider to share with them some of her finest silken web and told her of their plan. She generously agreed, and so they began gathering the web and winding it into a shimmering skein. The Fairy Queen spoke. My friends, tonight if the child returns, we will greet her as one of our own, for she means to help save my life. If she succeeds, we will weave a net of flowering vines and carry her away to our warmer place. We shall be with her always. The fairies nodded in agreement with the queen's proposal and waited in anticipation for the child's return. That night, when the moon was full and high, Wintersong slipped into her cape and out into the night. Deeper and deeper into the forest she went, the moon's glow lighting her way. Soon she heard the familiar melody of voices and saw the shimmer of gossamer wings. She's come, the fairy voices rang out in unison. And with the light of the moon and the glow of many friendly fireflies, she set about her work, mending the queen's torn wing. She sewed with loving care, and when the last stitch was tied, a silence fell upon the company, and all eyes were on the Fairy Queen. The queen raised one wing, then the other, and floated effortlessly above Wintersong's head, then dipped to place a kiss in the child's forehead. Wintersong felt the warm fan of the glorious wings and knew that she had 101 friends. The Fairy Queen spoke then, hushing the applause of the tiny hands. "My sweet child," she said, "my people and I have decided to take you with us when we make our journey westward as the autumn comes to a close. We will love you and care for you all the seasons of your life. You will be happy with us. This I promise you." Wintersong knelt down. "Oh, thank you so, but alas, kind queen, I cannot accept your wonderful invitation, for you see, I await the return of my father who is far away. I must stay here and be the song in his heart until he comes home to me. I must stay and be his winter song." The wise fairy nodded her pretty head. "As you wish, my child," she said. "But because of your kindness to me, you deserve a special gift. I will send you a friend to take our place while the snowy mantle covers this land. You will know this friend for his beauty and kindness. You may trust and depend upon him." Then to herself she thought, "You will need a true friend, my dear child, for your father may never return." A great celebration of singing and dancing followed as Wintersong became acquainted with all of her new friends. The wild beasts stayed far away that night, for they feared the human presence, so the little group was safe and sound. The days of warm spring and summer flew by as if they too had wings. Days of gaiety and laughter and friendship were enjoyed by all. The fairies grew to love the girl, and she them. Then one day near summer's end, a messenger came to the great castle doors. His solemn face told Wintersong that his news was sad. She listened to his tragic words in sorrow. "Your father, the king, has fallen in battle." Wintersong's heart was heavy and cold as she climbed the stairs to her tower room. She held the golden locket to her breast and cried unto her pillow. That night in the forest, the fairies waited for Wintersong to come and join their festivities. They waited and waited, but still no sign of her. Soon the singing and playing ceased, and all had worried faces. "We must fly to Wintersong," cried the Fairy Queen, "for surely something is wrong." The fairies wove a garland of the last of the summer's blooms to take to her, but when they had reached her tower window and heard her pitiful sobs, they knew she could not be consoled. Wintersong could only repeat over and over, "Oh, Father, please come back to me." The Fairy Queen said not a word, but placed the garland of flowers on Wintersong's pillow, hoping that the fragrance might soothe her despair. Then the fairies left as quickly as they had come. A few days passed, and at last she came to the forest to find them. The autumn leaves were aflame with color, and the fairies were making ready to take their leave. The Fairy Queen spoke quietly into Wintersong's ear. "Hello, dear friend. The warm summer is over, and we must be away. But never fear, you shall not be lonely, though the snow covers our meeting place. For remember, I shall send a friend to you who will hold your heart and keep it warm until we meet again in the spring." So they said their fare-thee-wells, Wintersong and her tiny friends, and more than a few tears were shed at their parting. The days grew shorter and the nights grew long. Wintersong sat watching the flames play in the hearth fire on those nights. She thought of her little friends far away and dreamed of the friend the Fairy Queen had promised to send. The castle seemed even colder now, its walls a fortress encircling her lonely heart. She walked the winding hallways, and each footfall seemed to echo her loneliness. "She did promise me," Wintersong whispered to no one. Then one night when the moon was full and luminous and the snow sparkled upon the ground, she heard the sound of prancing hooves approaching. "My father?" she said, and ran to push the huge doors open wide. But alas, it was not her father's face she saw in the moonlight. It was the face of a magnificent white horse. It was no ordinary horse. This horse had beautiful wings that were tipped with gold and gentle eyes the color of an emerald forest. His breath was sweet and warm as he neighed and lowered his great wing down, beckoning Wintersong to climb upon his back. Wintersong had seen her father's great steed and had touched its downy nose, but had never been allowed to ride him. Yet she did not hesitate for a moment, for this splendid animal looked so kind and gentle. She marveled at the wondrous wings and stroked the silky mane. Then, wrapping her winter coat tightly around her, she climbed onto the warm place between his wings. He stood then and threw back his beautiful head. She caught his mane in both her hands as he rose up, leaving the ground behind. Up, up, and away they flew, away from those cold castle walls, up where the air seemed warm and still, and the stars twinkled like diamonds. They soared over rivers and valleys and over high mountain peaks. The clouds gently grazed her cheeks, and she felt her heart warm in her chest, as if enfolded in loving hands. She thought of her mother, whom she'd never known, and of her father, whose memory she held so dear. And she felt happy and content between those wings, among the stars, happy as never before. So the winter months passed, and each night he came, her white prince she called him. He showed her the stars' constellations, and the face and the moon, and the colors of the midnight sun, and all the lands near and far. Each morning, when the sun peeped over the horizon, she would find herself in her tower room, in her own warm bed, as rested as if she had been deep in sleep. She spent her days thinking of her beautiful white prince and the fairies who soon would return. One night, during their midnight ride, Wintersong put her lips to the horse's ear and asked, "Did the fairy queen send you? Will you stay with me forever?" Her white prince could not speak in human words, yet his soft green eyes told her not to worry. Wintersong took the golden locket from around her neck and tied it into the locks of his silken mane. "Always be my own white prince," she whispered. One morning, when the sweet smell of April filled her tower room, Wintersong arose, threw a lighter cape around her shoulders, and hurried into the forest. Lo and behold, there they were, gaily laughing and frolicking in the new blades of grass. They were larger in number now, she noticed the lilting voices of the tinier ones, babies or so it seemed. Wintersong felt a caress upon her hair and turned to see the lovely fairy queen smiling with outstretched arms. Wintersong kissed the tiny hands and breathlessly began telling an amazing winter's tale of the beautiful winged horse with the emerald eyes and of her midnight adventures. The fairy queen smiled knowingly as she listened to the girl, who was lonely no more. That evening, Wintersong hurried back to the castle to await the sound of hoofs. She waited and waited, but still no sign of her white prince. Sorrow filled her heart. "Oh, where have you gone, my white prince?" she whispered, and watching her candle slowly burn away, she sat in the stillness until dawn. When the sun peeked into her window, Wintersong left her tower room and walked ever so slowly into the deep forest, feeling as though she had lost a good friend. "They came back to me," she said softly. "They kept their promise." Suddenly she heard excited voices and human-like laughter. Wintersong slipped into the bushes to watch and listen. She could not believe what she saw. There in the midst of the fairy ring sat a handsome young boy, near to her own age, she guessed. His skin was pale like her own, and his hair, like spun silk, fell around his face and over his brow. Those eyes, she thought, so gentle and kind and familiar too, the color of an emerald forest. Wintersong was enraptured by this wonderful boy. Suddenly Wintersong felt a light tweak upon her ear. "Join us, sweet child," said the fairy queen. "Join us and meet your new friend." He turned then and stood to face her as the fairy queen led her forward. "This is Summer Song," she said. He will be your companion for as long as this land is warm and green. The boy smiled and reached out to touch Wintersong's hand. We will be friends forever, he said. I will be with you all of the seasons of your life. Then Wintersong saw something glistening near his ear, a small golden heart tied with a scarlet ribbon to a lock of his hair. She looked into those dazzling eyes again and understood. Her white prince had not left her after all. Yes, she said, we will be friends forever. The time passed in happy seasons, and the friendship between Wintersong and Summersong grew. In the spring they danced and sang and frolicked with the fairies and the wildflowers of the deep forest. Even the wood sprites and gnomes joined in the fun. They were all the best of friends. When the leaves again turned red and gold and covered the forest floor, the fairies bid adieu, and when the snow became a blanket upon the ground, the White Prince returned to take Wintersong traveling across the midnight skies. During those winter days she attended to the duties and business of the kingdom, for there was much to do. Although her life was full and happy, she thought of her father often and missed him deeply. Soon it was spring again. Wintersong had said goodbye to Winter and to her winged companion. Now she looked forward to the return of her woodland friends. One morning she awakened to the sound of hooves, horses' hooves approaching the castle. Looking out her tower window and through the morning mist, she saw two figures on horseback, riding side by side. She dressed quickly as the door knocker sounded its tap-tap-tap. Wintersong rushed down the stairway and past the sleepy kitchen maid. Who could this be, she asked, as she hurried to open the doors. Wintersong, said a strong, deep voice, is it you? As he spoke, the man pulled back the hood of his cape, and Wintersong recognized her own dear father's face. She flew into his arms and, kissing his cheek, said, "Oh, Father, you've come back to us." Next to him, she saw the smiling face of a lovely woman with long dark hair and soft brown eyes. "This is Mira," said her father. Later, by the hearth fire, after they had enjoyed a fine meal, her father the king told his story. "I was wounded in battle and near death when Mira found me," he said. "She took me to her village and into her own cottage. With her loving care, I was able to regain some of my strength, but I was unable to make the journey back home. My heart ached to tell you that I was alive, but I could find no messenger to carry the news across the snowy countryside. As I made my slow recovery, Mira and I became good friends, and that friendship has grown into a deep love. She loved me, not knowing that I was a king. Now I wish to take Mira as my wife and as my queen." Mira spoke then in a soft and gentle voice. "My dear girl, your father has spoken of you so often in these past 2 years. He has told me that you are forever the song within his heart. It is my wish that you and I will become the best of friends." Wintersong embraced Mira, saying, "At last our kingdom will have a king and a queen. Yes, Mira, we will become the best of friends." The king smiled as he looked at his daughter. She had become a kind and confident young woman who had attended to the duties of the kingdom in his absence. She had become a true princess. That very evening, Wintersong heard the musical sound of fairy voices on the air and hurried into the forest. There were her loyal friends. The fairy queen was as radiant and beautiful as ever. "Hello, my dear one," she said as she kissed Wintersong's forehead. "It is wonderful to see you again." Wintersong felt the flutter of wings as all of her tiny friends gathered around her and kissed her smiling face in turn. And there he was as well, her winter companion, once again, a human like herself. "Hello, Wintersong," he said as he smiled and touched her hand. "Hello, my dear friends. I have so much to tell you," said the girl. "My father has returned, and with him is a lovely woman who he will marry and make his queen. We must plan a most beautiful wedding for them." All of her friends joyously agreed. And so it was. The wedding took place in the spring green forest, with Summersong and the fairies as honored guests. All the kingdom rejoiced at the wonderful news, and a great celebration followed. That summer the king decreed that a cottage be built and a lovely garden planted there in the forest, so there always would be a place for Wintersong's friends when they returned. The kingdom with its emerald forest is a wonderful place, because great friendship dwells within, and friendship has magic in it. We believe that they live there happily still. So, my friend, when you look up at night and see a white streak moving across the starry sky, it may not be a comet or a falling star. Still, make a wish, for it just might be your true friend looking to find you.